because what we want them to learn are words they already know. And one of the things that Steven Pinker, who's a linguist, tells us, by the time, and this is contrary to much of this notion that economically poor kids come and they don't have much of a vocabulary, and the poor little suckers, no one's ever talked to them, therefore they're in great deficit. Pinker tells us on the average, all children by the time they're about 5 years old have about 15,000 words in their mental lexicons. They're not the ones that school wants you to have, but they're there. I ain't got none was one set of them. By the time the child is 18, they have about 60,000. Now, I tried to figure out, if we did what we did in school, how many words would a kid learn at 20 words a week over the 12 years of schooling. If you figure that out, it comes out to about 8,000. Again, doesn't make much sense that we're busy trying to fill in these words when the child already has 60,000 words at their ready. The other one that I think I'd like to then focus on is, how do we treat the conditions of learning, given what we've heard today? Well, one of the things I think, as we just suggested, we don't acknowledge the capacity of children. We don't acknowledge the capacity of youth. Again, a lot of the work, I did some work with NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health, on youth development programs. And when we talked about antisocial behavior or prosocial was the absence of anti. That's not real pro. The other thing is the plasticity. I hear often that we're predicting what somebody's going to be able to do from what we're seeing in front of us. They're not college ready. How do we know that? They're not going to be able to do this. How do we know that? Because we have very few empirical studies that show that the stuff we tell somebody they have to do and know actually does predict it. I don't have any problem if you actually have that kind of faith-based stuff. But I think when we put children's lives at stake by telling them if they don't know this, they can't do that, we better be pretty sure that we know that this predicts that. The other is, given that capacity we just talked about, we know from the cognitive science literature how important prior knowledge is. We spend little time finding out what that child or what that young person's prior knowledge is. What do they know? Eleanor Duckworth, who just retired at Harvard a little bit ago, has a book called The Having of Wonderful Ideas. Her notion in that little book is kids are always wondering. Do you know what a wondering is? You're doing that now, right? I sit in faculty meetings. Sometimes I lead them, and I see people shaking their heads, and I think, they're with me. And then I find out this meant you're full of shit. And shouldn't record that, I know. But as a kid, I used to wonder, again, my mother passed away a number of years ago. I deeply miss her, but I can say this now. We had cockroaches in our apartment. You know what? They were the New Jersey kind. They were very small and they were very fast. And they would crawl up the wall like lightning speed. And I, as a kid, sharing the bedroom with my two other brothers, at night I would turn off the light, wait, turn it back on, and see how quickly they took a gross to an 8-year-old, cool. And I also wondered, where did they go? Now, here's the problem. I knew this much. I could not come into school, given what I learned about my language, I could not come into school and say, I've been wondering about those cockroaches. But I was deeply puzzled by that. Now, this explains a lot, I know, but I want to suggest to you that that's what we know about the human mind. We're always questioning and wondering, but we spend very little time in our educational settings asking and pulling out of that. We know instead teaching practice involves most of the time the teacher getting smarter, because the teacher is being metacognitive, but not the child. That is, the teacher talks all the time, not the kid. And then that does bring me to metacognition. How important metacognition is in the learning literature. Knowing what you know, talking about how you think you know it, what are the various ways you organize that, is extremely powerful. But again, given normal classroom practices, students' voices are minimally acknowledged. Adults' voices are greatly present. And finally, we can't underestimate the power of activity. I was pleased when Michael talked about the butt. Sitting on your butt, that is what a lot of schooling is about, is sitting. There's very little messiness. There's very little, let's move that stuff around. Unfortunately, I go into a lot of schools now. I used to see blocks. I used to see stuff that kids got dirty with, besides pencils. It's no longer present. I hope it's more and more present in after-school programs. I'm not sure. But I do know how important real materials, I know how important real activity is, and I know how important what people have talked about today, real relationships are. We have a school in West Sacramento that serves the economically poorest kids. One of the things the kids tell us consistently, even though they have been kids not very successful until in the last couple of years, how important their relationship with their teachers, plural, not one teacher, the teachers who are there. They actually do believe they care about them. They actually believe they can go to them and talk to them about what's really going on. Those are invaluable. And what I hope we could come to today, Benjamin Barber talks about the necessity of schools being nurseries of democracy. I want to emphasize first the nurseries, and then I want to come back to the democracy. Nurseries have a very nice notion to them if we could get a hold of them. Because I often hear people say, well, look, these kids have to know what the rough and tumble world is right now. You know, they just have to know there's a cold, cruel world out there. That's not what we were just, one of us was talking about tomatoes. Tomatoes are plants are put in hothouses in the winter to grow what? Strong, as some people up north say, roots. Strong roots, right? The idea is once the roots are strong enough, they can go out and be planted and withstand the heat if you're in Davis, or withstand the cold if you're someplace else. But there needs to be a place that nurtures that, that supports that. That's what educational programs are. They are nurturing places. And then I think they have to be nurturing places, because I keep hearing, again, the academics. I also hear we've got to deal with the economics, and I think economics are very important. But if you listen to Jefferson, and if you go back and read Hamilton, and then you go forward and read Horace Mann and Dewey and others, the reason that we have public education, and after school is public, I'm almost there, after school is public education, is because it is to advance active democratic citizenship. That's your role. The role isn't how do we better advance school. The role is how do we advance democracy. And I'm so pleased that you're here with me trying to figure that out. Thank you very much.